I want to quickly take a look at a new feature in Photoshop CS5, and that's Mini Bridge. If you're comfortable with working with the bridge from previous Creative Suite products, it's essentially the same thing, but the great thing about it is it's directly located inside of Photoshop, so you don't have to toggle back and forth between the two different programs. Now, if you've never used Bridge before, well, then I guess you don't have to worry about it, but basically, it's a way to browse and manage your files. And it's a little bit easier to work with now that there's a miniature version developed specifically for Photoshop. So there's a couple different ways that you can access Mini Bridge. You'll notice over here I have an MB icon. I can simply click that to open up the panel. If you don't have that icon, you can come up to the application bar and you can click Mini Bridge from there. It's going to go ahead and open up a panel. And you'll notice that right now it says that Bridge is disconnected. I'm going to go ahead and click the Home button. And what that means, that Bridge is disconnected, is that Bridge is not running in the background. In order for you to work with Mini Bridge inside of Photoshop, the full-blown Bridge program has to be up and running. If you go ahead and click Browse Files, you'll see a little preview here, but basically what has happened, if I look at the dock, is Bridge has launched. So now I'm really using Bridge to be able to navigate through these different files. Now, the great thing about that from a memory management standpoint is we're using the Bridge's memory allocation resources opposed to Photoshop's memory allocation resources. So in terms of having Bridge running in the background, it's actually a pretty good thing in terms of performance for Photoshop. With that being said, what we have are different pods inside this bridge. We have the navigation pod and we also have the content pod. Basically what we're looking at here is a directory structure within my file system, so what's on my computer. You can see a breadcrumb system up top here, and if you don't, you can click this menu right here and choose Path Bar, and it'll activate this path bar. What this path bar is doing is it's showing you how you're getting to the specific directory that you're looking at right now. For example, if I click on Desktop here in the breadcrumb, it's going to bring me back to the desktop and I can see all the different folders I have stored on my desktop. So right now I'm in the Favorites section of the navigation pod, but I could go to Recent Folders, Recent Files, and even Collections. In this case, Favorites is fine, and I do in fact want to be on the desktop because that's where I have the majority of my images. Go ahead and open up any directory you have on your system. In my case, I'm going to open up this Exotics folder. When I do, you can see all the different thumbnails of all the different images that are inside that folder. And you can see it's a collection of exotic cars. So at this point, really what you want to do is probably customize the Mini Bridge to better suit your working habits, and also maybe a better way for you to view the thumbnails within that folder. So let's look at some of the options we have in terms of viewing this content. Most of those options are located down here towards the bottom. The first, in this View menu, you'll notice I have a couple different options. The first option is as a list, or I should say probably the last option, but if you go ahead and select that option, you'll notice it starts to list all the different images inside that directory. And it gives you some additional information about the date created, any ratings that you have applied to those images, or labels. Again, if I come back to this menu, I can choose As Details. And if you select As Details, not only do you get a thumbnail, but you can see that information, that additional information printed out on the right. Coming back to this menu, we can also choose As Thumbnails, which happens to be my favorite way of working, but a couple options associated with these thumbnails are located up top. We can choose Show Thumbnail Only, which means you won't get any file naming information underneath that thumbnail. I can go ahead and activate this menu again. I can choose Show Items in Pages. Now this option, if you go ahead and select that, notice if you do select it, this scroll bar will disappear. If you select this option, what happens, instead of scrolling through the thumbnails, what you'll do is move through the thumbnails using these arrows, more like a web browser or moving through different pages of thumbnails. I'm going to switch it back to the way that we were looking at it before, so I don't want to view it as pages, and I do want to see the additional information about some of these thumbnails. You can also increase the size or decrease the size of the thumbnails. when you start manipulating the sizes of the thumbnails, notice some of these thumbnails are getting cropped off. And don't forget, you can also expand the mini bridge panel to increase the size allotment of this content pod so you can see more thumbnails at a time. So like I was saying, these thumbnails down here are cropped off, and if you don't particularly care for that, you can come back to this menu and you can choose gridlock. When you select gridlock, what it does is it places each thumbnail in a grid area, so you can only have the thumbnail show up if it's going to fit in the allotted space for the content pod. So finally, you can also view this content as a film strip. Now, generally the film strip doesn't make a ton of sense in this case, but some people like to dock the mini bridge at the bottom of their application window. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to click and drag this tab down here towards the bottom until I see this blue-gray highlight. Once you let go, you're docking the bridge to that location. Of course, it's far too tall, so I'm going to go ahead and click and drag this down a little bit, reducing the height of the mini bridge. But now the film strip view makes a little bit more sense for looking at these thumbnails. Again, I'm going to switch it back to its original position, so I'm going to drag the tab over here until I get the highlight where I want it. I'll let go of the mouse, and the mini bridge is back in place. So I'm going to switch this back to thumbnails. Finally, just a couple other options that you have in terms of organizing the content. There's a menu here. You can choose to show any reject files, hidden files, and folders. The next menu is how you're going to categorize this content. Do you want to list them based upon ratings, based upon rejected or unrated items? Or do you want to show labeled items only or only unlabeled items? Here, in this menu, you're going to specify how you want the order of the images to appear. Do you want it to appear based on file name, date created, size, etc.? Finally, this last option up top here, if you want to open an image, you can place it in Photoshop, or there's some automation commands in terms of batching out a collection of images. You can merge to an HDR Pro image, or you could use the photo merge command. So some of those automation commands are available here in Mini Bridge that were also available in Bridge CS4 and, of course, CS5. There are some preview options available as well. If I come over here and highlight this image, in this menu, you'll notice you can view these images or the particular thumbnail you have selected in different ways. First of all, you can choose slideshow review mode, which lets you compare images side by side. A slideshow obviously is going to be a slideshow. You can do a full screen preview, which takes over the entire screen, or you can just simply choose preview. Shift space is the keyboard shortcut. If you select that, notice the image gets larger within the mini bridge. I'll go ahead and close out of that, but again, it's a handy keyboard shortcut. If you come down here and find an image that you want to preview, all you have to do is hold down the Shift key and the space bar, and you get that image preview here inside of Mini Bridge. And again, it's nice because you're not leaving Photoshop, you're not leaving Mini Bridge to see this preview. And up top here, there are some additional options as well. For example, there is a preview pod that's also available. If you select that, you get a little preview pod up here towards the top whenever you select a thumbnail. But as you can see, the preview pod really doesn't have a lot of screen space available to it. In fact, the preview pod is smaller than my thumbnails at this point, so I generally don't use that. And finally, if you want to open an image inside of Photoshop, all you have to do is double-click it, and it'll launch that image. And I can collapse the mini bridge by clicking this little two-way arrow here, or of course you can click the button here in the docked panel to toggle it on and off. So the mini bridge is a great way to browse your files and manage your files when working with them inside of Photoshop without having to jump into the separate bridge program.